Welcome to Unleash the Athlete. My name is James Leith, and today is a replay of a podcast that I was on called the Sideline Perspective. The host is Mac St. Onge, and I met Mac a few years ago at a Way of Champions conference in Colorado. She was a student athlete back then. She went to Dartmouth, dual sports, ice hockey and rugby. And now she's created this great resource for athletes to know how to come back from injury and also how to transition out of sport, which is a very underserved demographic within athletics, because athletes will graduate or decide not to play and they lose their identity, they don't know where to go or what to do, and she's creating a community over there at the Sideline Perspective that is very, very helpful. So today's conversation is mostly about leadership, conversation and a topic that I absolutely love. Please welcome my friend, Mac St. Onge.
This is the Sideline Perspective podcast, where we tackle the roller coaster ride that is injury and retirement from competitive sports. Buckle up as we dive into the real topics facing sideline athletes today. I'm your host, Mackenzie St. Onge. Let's talk. Hey everyone, today's episode is with James Leith, and we are talking about leadership. James is a mental performance coach and founder of Unleash the Athlete. With a bachelor's in communication, a master's in performance psychology, and almost 20 years of coaching experience, James teaches leadership, character, and mental resiliency to elite performers in sport, theater, and business through keynotes, workshops, and online courses. He's worked with many organizations including Mind Body, the American Heart Association, the Dallas Cowboys, the Green Bay Packers, and before the NBA season ended early, he was with the Chicago Bulls. James is a dear friend of mine and someone who I really look up to as a mentor and voice when it comes to these topics, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Well, so excited to have you on the podcast, James, to talk about leadership and what that looks like, what that means while you're competing as an athlete, also while you're on the sidelines. But to get us started here, I'd love for you to explain what is Unleash the Athlete, which is your program and your company. Why does it exist, and what kind of drew you to do something like this in the sports world specifically?
Well, there's a lot to answer in those multiple questions. Thank you for having me on, Mac. It's great to hear your voice and to be connected to you. Unleash the Athlete is my way of teaching athletes the things I wish I would have known when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So in high school and in college, and chasing a dream after college, there was all these things that I learned in my late 20s and 30s that I thought, if I knew that when I was younger, maybe I would have stressed less. Maybe I would have been a little less anxious, or maybe a little more prepared. And it's not just the mental resiliency stuff like goal setting and imagery and pre-performance routines, but with the leadership aspect, I teach a lot about leadership development and character development, and just making sure that guys and girls know that that what they do matters, and it matters not just now, but it matters in the future. Mm-hmm. And what they do or don't do could limit their choices later on in life. And so I do a lot of that kind of education. And so it's a little bit education, it's a little bit entertainment, infotainment, maybe, I guess you could say. And I've been doing it for a couple years now, officially, but unofficially, I've been doing this stuff for almost 2 decades now, and bringing activities to practice and making practice fun for my athletes. And I just recently, over the last couple of years since you and I met, have been making it more formal.
Yeah. And what is it about sports in particular that made it a platform that you wanted to engage with this stuff in? Because, this could be brought into school systems, this could be brought into, other programs, but why sports?
Great question. I played a lot of sports growing up, and my father told me that he gave me two choices. He said, you can be on a team or you can have a job. And I thought, well, I like sports, so I think I'll just go and be on a team. And so I went from football to baseball, basketball, wrestling. I was even a cheerleader for a bit, like competition type stuff, and did track and field. And I learned a lot about life through sports. And I think that sports is a microcosm of life. And people, you and I have talked about this multiple times, in that when athletes age out or when they leave their sport, whether they retire, whether they get injured, whatever it is, they're more equipped to go into the business world. But a lot of them, most of them, don't feel like they are ready. They don't feel like they have the tools. But in reality, they do. They have all the tools they need to be successful, and somebody needs to just translate those. And so I feel like sports is a way that I can teach life lessons that, again, I wish I knew. And there's a deeper meaning to what I do. My brother, he passed away when I was in my early 20s, and he was my younger brother, and he made some bad decisions and ended up in jail. And it was just, he just, whenever he was around certain people, he would do the things that those people did. And when I am out speaking to especially high school athletes, I see a bunch of Monties out there. That was my brother's name, Monty. And it's what I have a tattoo. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's on my left arm, and it's actually from Jumanji. And it's those two. Did you ever see Jumanji with The Rock? And
yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
so you know how on their arm it shows that they have how many lives they have left?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I have that tattoo on my arm, and there's 2 lives. And what it means is that I'm living for 2. So when I write, like, it's facing me, and it reminds me that, like, I'm not just living for me, but I'm also living for my brother.
That's powerful. Yeah. No, that is a really powerful thing to bring into, just waking up in the morning and recognizing, like, the impact that you have and that you want to make in this world, and the intentionality behind that, I think, is incredibly cool. Will you talk a bit about the pieces that you felt like you maybe didn't necessarily get to learn or weren't educated formally on in your athletic career, and that you wish you had the opportunity to have conversations around, and that you're now trying to help people progress towards and translate skills in when they kind of move on into other aspects of their life, whether they're still competing or not? How did that particular transition go for you? Like, what was your process in learning which pieces of you as an athlete and what you learned in sports actually did translate?
Good question. When you decide on a niche in life and people see you as somebody who is involved in that stuff, they ask you questions. And I started getting the same questions over and over and over. How am I a better leader? That one probably more than any, because I can remember multiple times as a kid being told, step up, like, be a leader. And I'm like, okay, but can you tell me how to do that? Like you want me to step up and you want me to be this leader, but also you're not teaching me how to do that. And so there was this disconnect even as I was a kid. And I could tell that, like, I was being told to do something, but I wasn't given the tools to actually do those things. And there were other situations where I remember being a kid and seeing an athlete that had just phenomenal talent and, God-given athletic ability, but they had an attitude problem or they were entitled. Entitlement is not a new thing. I know people talk about it. This generation's so entitled. No, my generation's entitled. The generation before me was entitled. We're all entitled. We all think we deserve more than we do. And it's this idea that I can teach them through my own experience, saying, look, this is what I learned. You can learn from this, or you can go through the pain on yourself. There's the idea that you can stand on the shoulders of giants and do better and build off of what they did, or just decide, I'm going to do this all on my own and I'm going to make mistakes. And, there's not enough room these days for an athlete to make a big mistake. I mean, there's story after story after story of an athlete tweeting something, one tweet, and their career's over, and their contract is gone, their scholarship is gone. And I heard a story a few days ago about a kid. He's an adult now, but and he's a registered sex offender. And whenever I hear somebody is a registered sex offender, you're just like, you think the worst. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't even know how to respond. He goes, listen, I was on a baseball team in high school, and I was locked out of the locker room, and I peed, and I got caught by a police officer, and now I'm a registered sex offender.
Wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, like there's probably times where I did something similar out of necessity.
Right.
Yeah, and you're just like, okay, like that's a cautionary tale people need to know about, because you're 17, or he was an 18-year-old guy, and now for life he's a registered sex offender because he was locked out of a locker room and had to pee and didn't want to wet his pants.
Man.
And he jokes about it, and it's sad, but he's just like, I wish I would have just peed my pants.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten in trouble for urinating on myself. And so, that's the law. You're not allowed to urinate in public. So, I mean, I get it. But then also, like, that kid, his life is severely limited because of that. And so I'll share that story. And, there's lots of stories about tweets. And I remember Miss Teen America was like, her crown a couple years ago, it was like 5-6 years ago. She was crowned for 3 hours because someone found on Twitter that she had written down the lyrics of a rap song that had a slur in it. And so it was taken from her.
Wow.
And so I'll teach these young athletes and pro athletes, to be honest with you, to go back and delete stuff that your ignorant self put out there. And in fact, when I'm working with athletes that are injured, that's one of the things I tell them to do. It's like, you have time now. Go clean up your timeline. Go clean up your Instagram, your Facebook, your Twitter. If you've sent anything to somebody, make sure it's been deleted. Like, just be very cognizant that when I was younger, the adults would always say, like, that's a permanent mark on your record. And I'm like, oh no, the record. Then I found out as an adult there was no record. They were lying. There's nothing. But now there's a record.
There really is.
And even if you think, like, if you read the terms of the agreement terms for Snapchat, for TikTok, for Instagram, for all these things, they own all the content. Like, you're not paying for it. And so if you don't pay for it, they can change it whenever. Like, whenever Facebook does an update and everybody loses their mind because they're like, this is ridiculous, you can't change it. It's like, yeah, they can. Right. You don't pay for Facebook. They can do whatever. They could shut down. Well, they can't. They're a public company now, but Twitter could shut down. Like, so there's a danger out there because of all the availability of just all the options that kids have these days. There's so many different ways to get in trouble, so many different ways to ruin your future choices. So if I can go out there and share some stories and just be like, look, it doesn't have to be like this, and you don't have to make these mistakes, then that's what I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's things that when you get stuck in peer culture, as a younger athlete, or really even, like you said, up to the professional level, anytime you're just in this tight, closely knit peer group, there's a set of norms, there's a set of things that make you a part of the popular crowd or not. And sometimes those can be blinders towards, like, the true right and wrong of things if you're so stuck in a culture that's being created in the locker room, being created on the field, etc. But isn't necessarily broadening it to be the appropriate rights and wrongs within the broader scheme of the world.
Right. Yeah, no, well put.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that, then how, I'm curious, how do you define leadership, and how would you, or maybe you wouldn't, differentiate leadership on the sports field or in that context versus leadership in other aspects of life?
I think that leadership is influence. It's very, very just cut and dry. And that influence can be in the boardroom, on the ball field. It can be out on the playground. It can be in a relationship, in a meeting, and in your own life. After this, I'm meeting with about 100 baseball players from all over the country, and we're going to talk about self-leadership. And it really starts with it's on Zoom, like everything's virtual these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it really starts with the self and with being able to lead yourself. And if you can influence yourself, if you can influence the things that you do and have discipline, then you can expect that other people will want to follow you. And then once people follow you, then you're a leader. And so you're influencing them. And that translates everywhere. I mean, when I speak to college teams or when I'm in the boardroom with a sales team, the message isn't very different. I might use different vernacular, maybe some different examples, or maybe not, because the idea that everybody's a leader, I mean, like, are leaders born? Well, everybody's born.
Mm-hmm.
So there's never been a leader that wasn't born. And leadership is a trait that you can learn. And if one of the things I love to do is ask athletes to list their top 10. You've seen us do this at the Way of Champions conference, where you list out like what are 2 leadership traits. And inevitably, like 99% of them are mental traits. They have nothing to do with height or strength or speed or loudness of voice or anything that is kind of out of your control genetically. It's all just stuff that you can control. And so leadership is something that you can develop and that you have to find your own style. And there's not just one type of leadership. You know, the leaders that are up on stage and the leaders that are loud, that's one option. But did you ever see Braveheart?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was watching Braveheart the other day because there's not a whole lot going on. And
because why not?
You know, yeah, COVID-19. So living that quarantine lifestyle. And I was watching Braveheart, and there was this one scene where the king was taking a bride to be with her for the night as his reward for being king. He stole her away from the groom, and it was this really dramatic scene. There's just gonna be this big fight. And before the two kind of little armies go at it, the woman like walks in between all of them, doesn't say a word, and just puts her hand on the sword and kind of lowers it down, and then goes over to her husband and kisses him, and like she totally diffused the entire situation. She didn't say a word. She wasn't loud. She wasn't like, all right, you know, like we're not. And she completely diffused the situation just by being calm and being present. And the rest of the story is terrible, but like that moment, I just thought that's leadership, you know. Or Dorothy. I was watching The Wizard of Oz a couple weeks ago. It's my favorite movie, and Dorothy has this really great story about how she delegates, and she's like, okay, I need brains. She's like, I got the scarecrow. I need heart, and I got the Tin Man. I need courage. I got the lion. And so in order to achieve her goal, she knew she couldn't do it on her own. So she had these other characters. The beautiful thing about that story, and a lot of people forget, is that she was asleep the whole time, and everything that she needed was already inside her. And so leadership is in everybody, but it looks different to each person depending on your experience, depending on, are you introverted, extroverted, are you a people person, like, you know, whatever it is. But there's a leadership style out there for you to develop, and it will evolve over time.
Yeah, and like you were saying about the different styles, like I think it's so important that you are authentic to your natural style of leadership, right? If you are a quiet person and then all of a sudden you're in expected to step up as a leader in some way, shape, or form, and you're turning into this super vocal kind of like authoritative person, people are going to be like, oh, that's not really the person that I've known and built trust in. That's a hard thing to follow. So I think that piece of reflecting on who you are and where you're naturally operating from is so important. I'm thinking about the audience and the demographic that the Sideline perspective speaks to, which is those who don't get to put sport as their number one for any way, shape, or form. Retirement, injury, COVID-19 is absolutely applicable in this situation. What would you say leadership could look like for those groups of people? And I'd love it if you'd touch on some of the leading yourself versus leading others that you were mentioning you're going to go speak to this baseball team about, because I think this could be a really cool opportunity for people to start reflecting on what it means, both of those things for them. What does it look like to lead
Yeah.
themselves right now?
Yeah. So there's not a lot in our control, but there are some things that we can control. For example, I had a track athlete call me a few weeks ago, and he was really bummed because it's his 8th grade season and he's not gonna have a season. And he goes, "Do you have any advice for me?" And I was like, "Why aren't you gonna have a season?" He's like, "It was canceled." I was like, "Look, dude, you're not like playing basketball or baseball. Like, you don't need the team to actually, compete against your own time. All you need is a stretch of land and a stopwatch."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "What do you mean?" I go, "Look, your meets are on Saturday, right?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Tell your mom and dad that on Saturdays you have a meet and you're going to go out in the front yard and you're going to run your stuff and you mark it out throughout the week during your quote unquote practices. And your little brother and little sister are going to be out there and you're going to compete every week where you would have a meet. You're still going to do it." He's like, "I can do that?" I'm like, "Bro, yes, of course you can do that." He thought it was Christmas morning. Like, I brought him a bicycle. He was so excited. He's like, "Yeah, but what about my teammates? How do I motivate them?" I'm like, "Well, there you go. You can't. And it's not your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If your teammates aren't doing the same thing, then that's not your problem. You can tell them that you're doing this, and because of the restrictions, we're not allowed to be around other people in this manner, but you can tell them what you're doing. Why don't you go and lead the charge
Mm-hmm.
to have meets? And then you have a group me account and you just post your times, and you all just commit to giving actual times instead of being like, "Oh, I'm gonna lie on my times." It's like, that's a form of leadership, is being held accountable and then
Mm-hmm.
also having integrity. And if other people are running faster than you, just use that as motivation. He's like, "Oh my gosh." And so he checked in with me a couple days ago, and he's in the middle of his track season. Like, it's so great, And so there's things like that we can do. Now, I love to lift weights, and that's part of my community time. Like, my hot yoga time 4 or 5 times a week it fills my soul, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't go into the yoga studio. It's closed. The owner's in there and she's doing live feeds, and I'm sitting here on the floor, and every time I do downward dog, my dog thinks that I'm down there for him, so he wants to come and cuddle. So it's a very different experience, but
Right.
there's a way. If you really need to achieve something, then you just have to be creative. I can't lift heavy weights right now, but I can fill up my 5-gallon water jugs and I can walk up the stairs.
Yeah.
I can lift up furniture, and I'm a grown up, so I don't have to get permission to do that. I can just tie a rope to something and start pulling on it. Yesterday I was pushing my Jeep out in the parking lot with one of my neighbors driving it. And so there's different ways that you can achieve what you want to achieve, but the best ability that you can have right now is your adaptability.
Mm-hmm. I love
that's
that.
the number one ability that you can have right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to practice that self-accountability, just practicing the self-accountability with that as well, like you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I just actually came up with that. I need to write that down. That's pretty good. You bring out the best in me, Mac. Come on.
Save that. No, that's so awesome, because I'm giggling to myself that yesterday my roommate and I were out in the backyard just trying to, put something together and enjoy the sunshine that was out there. And we found, an old bed frame in the barn in the back, and you were like, "All right, we're going to do overhead squats with the foot of a bed frame," and with like just crazy things. And it started kind of as a joke of like, "All right, let's do like a silly workout video." But in all reality, like, we got a great workout in and we had a blast doing it, and we found ways to be creative and have a positive mindset around that. And what a beautiful example of that track athlete, where his self-leadership really grew then into group leadership. And I think that's a great organic progression of that.
Yeah, I teach a progression that it says do, say, be. And this is one of my workshops that I do all around the world. And it's leadership development. And so the first one is do. You do the work, you earn respect, you get everybody's attention by showing up early, by making sure the locker room's cleaned up, just by just paying your dues and keeping your mouth shut. Just go and do. Then eventually people start asking you questions. They start looking to you as kind of a leader. And so it's the say part, right? You earn your voice. But you can't just go into a new team and just start spouting your mouth off because you have all this stuff to say. Like, even if everybody knows you're the best athlete on the team now, just keep your mouth shut for a little while. Figure out what the lay of the land is, And then it goes, you become the leader. You just, by default, by having put in the work, by earning your voice, you just become this leader. And I remember on different teams that I've been on and different teams that I've coached, leadership can come from anywhere. When I was a senior in high school, I tried out for the volleyball team. This is my senior year. I never played volleyball before. And these guys were really good. And they laughed at me, like, "What are you doing? Are you lost, James?" I'm like, "No, I'm trying out." And it was pretty obvious I was not even in the top 40 of trying out. But long story short, I made the team. And I didn't get much better from when I started to when I made the team. But a couple weeks after that, I was voted captain.
Wow.
And so what I learned in that situation is that leadership is not about performance. Leadership is about being integrity, being honest, being true, being committed, being all these things that people are like, that's the kind of person that we want to represent this organization or this team. And, throughout the season, I didn't play very much, but my coach was like, "Look, you're not very good. We both know this, but you bring a good energy to practice. And these athletes, they respect you. And so you're not going to play much, but I want you on the team because the role you're going to play is inspiration. The role you're going to play is encourager." And I was like, I got nothing else to do my senior year, spring semester. Boom, let's do it. So I agreed. And it was a great lesson because I learned that leadership was about more than performance.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that people take away from this talk, hopefully there's going to be plenty more than one because I can think of several, but leadership being more than performance, I think is something that I'd love for more people, more athletes, more cultures to hear and to really truly embrace because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we can wrap up here just with a couple quick answer questions if you're ready for them.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Sweet. So the Sideline Perspective community, it's built around being total teammates. So all of these values we've been talking about in terms of, leadership, etc. But it's about being a teammate, not just on the field, but off it as well. Being able to ask those questions like, "Hey, how are you really?" And support the pursuit of endeavors, not just solely as an athlete, but as a whole person. What to you is the biggest key to being a total teammate?
That's a good question. I think being a total teammate is being interested in how somebody is, not how somebody performed. When you're with your teammate, you can start with, "Hey, how you doing?" Not, "How did you perform last night?"
Yeah.
What's going on in your world? And it's the same thing I teach coaches, be more interested in the person, not the athlete. And so I think being a total teammate is somebody who is supporting their teammates despite performance.
Awesome. Next one is just to finish the sentence, "I am
blessed."
Yes.
So blessed. I got great friends. I got great health, and I got a purpose in life, and I got a really great dog.
What more could you
Nothing. Nothing. I had steak for lunch. I'm good to go. Let's go.
Awesome. Last one here. What does game day mean to you now?
Game day is when I'm on the stage. Game day is in about 7 minutes when I'm going to be talking to all those baseball players. My practice is early in the morning when I'm reading my Bible or I'm jumping in some devotional written by somebody. That's my practice, and going up on the marker board and writing out different things like this next lesson that I'm going to write out on. Your best ability is your adaptability. Come on. Come on. And so I think that, game day for me is, and what's funny, Mac, is that when I go and like what I was at Dartmouth, a couple months ago, and before I went into my interview, before I went and like hung out with everybody, I prepared just like I would if I was going out to a football game. I had the music blasting in my hotel room. I was dancing around. I was clean. I was looking good. I was like, yeah, this is it. Let's go. And then as soon as I like walked out, it was like poise, relax, breathing, let's go. But inside it was fired up, like just like when you put on all that gear and you go out on the ice and you're excited, but you've got to be like in that zone. You got to be calm. Or I never got to watch you play rugby, but I got to see your photos and stuff. And it's so important to just be like, prepare yourself to just go all out. And so when I am on stage, I go all out.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, I'll let you get going and get prepared to go all out with this next group that you have lined up here. But thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. This was such a great conversation.
I am so proud of you, Mac. I'm so happy that you're doing this, and it's just been a blessing to see you grow and to see what you're doing and all the people that you're helping. So I'm honored that you had me. So I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed speaking with her, and I've really loved watching what she's creating over there at the Sideline Perspective. Her links are in the show notes, so check it out. I got a sneak peek of who's coming up in the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be some great guests for her. So really proud of her. Please go support her. And if you haven't yet, then take out your cell phone, your mobile device, and shoot me a text. The word podcast to 972-236-5924. Join the UTA text messaging community, and I'll send you some cool stuff. Remember, there's an athlete in all of us. Unleash the athlete today.